constraints you face in undertaking your plan?
I'll give you what I jotted down, and some of these will be repeats, about 5 constraints that I see. First off, there's been a problem with communication just in terms of the multi-jurisdictional organizations and the advocates. And so I think as we continue to have our task force meetings and we continue to understand the various roles, there's going to have to be enhanced communication, and that's across the board. And certainly we are going to be pioneering in making sure that that occurs. Secondly is the issue of competing interests. We all know that we want to have a better creek, certainly than the condition that it's currently in, but there are competing interests that are prohibiting those activities to come forward. So we have to make sure that we're all on a consensus. We agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, we're doing the job that we're all charged to do, and that is to redevelop the creek to its fullest and best potential. Third is prioritization. This was so eloquently mentioned prior to, but in a city like Compton, sometimes a project of this magnitude is not prioritized, given the highest priority, particularly when you're looking at a state that has reduced its funding allocations across the board, a city where we're told that we have to be more conservative in our spending, and we have to look at the overall priorities for the city. First and foremost, any city official will tell you the highest priority in the city is the protection of our residents, the public safety, health, and welfare. And everything else is secondary, tertiary, and so forth. And so we are now, due to the leadership of the councilwoman, we are now reprioritizing this to make sure that Compton is making this a priority. We must redevelop our creek. Fourth is implementation. While we had a plan in place, we necessarily didn't have the implementation arm set so that we could actually do the development and the projects that were outlined. We have now taken on a very different attitude and role in saying we are now going to implement what is being recommended. And fifth and finally, and without saying, is funding. As I look at this overall plan, I can easily see a plan based upon the Compton Creek Garden Master Plan with all of its recommendations going into some 20-year recommendations, a plan that will result in more than $100 million in development after you look at all of the various activities that are being proposed. And so that is a large amount of money to try and come up with to do all of these implementations. But there's an old saying, in terms of how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So we have to take this incrementally and just take off a piece of what we can do, and then hope that we have a track record in showing that we can implement some of these recommendations and then try and seek additional funding. But this is really a Herculean task. The funding is not always there, but we have to be savvy and use the funding that is currently there and make sure that we're always out to try and get additional funding. So I would say those are the 5 constraints that I see.